Okay, so welcome to this podcast. I'm with Cassie Murray. Now, Cassie is based in Sydney, but moving around quite a lot. And I met Cassie, I think 4 or 5 years ago now. It's gone by quickly. And this was on,
Even more.
it could be more than that. Yeah, on whale watching boats in Sydney. And in fact, Cassie came with me when I organised a whale photography trip through We Were Observers, and Cassie was our marine biologist on board or naturalist, but the expert for anyone to ask questions. So thanks for joining me, Cassie.
Thank you for inviting me. It's exciting. Thanks.
My pleasure. So I wanted to get Cassie on because I've done a lot of chats with other photographers, but also it's good to hear the other side of it. And what I'm doing with my photography is very much about conservation. So I really wanted to get some stories across from people who actively work in the area of conservation. And one aspect of that we were just chatting about is that I think a lot of people assume that we know almost all there is to know about many animals. And in fact, we couldn't be further from the truth in many cases. So what Cassie does and a lot of other people is to try and understand what's going on with different animals and educate people in doing that. So we decided that you're going to be called a naturalist. And Cassie has been traveling quite a bit and is still traveling quite a bit. So I'm going to, I think, just hand over to you to talk a little bit about what you're doing, where you've been. And I'm quite envious, I have to say up front. I'm sure people listening will be as well. But I'll just hand over to you to talk a little bit about what you're doing now, Cassie, and where that's taking you. So over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So as you said, we met quite a few years ago through the whale watching community here in Sydney. So for a long time, I was working as a guide, naturalist, marine biologist on whale watching vessels, which I loved and still do love and get back to it whenever I can. But post-COVID, I kind of took myself off in a new direction and joined the expedition cruising world. So in the last 12 months, I've been very lucky to be able to work and travel to, I think at this point, 10 or so different countries as a naturalist on board these ships. So basically what that means is I join a ship that's going to a remote part of the world with tourists, and I'm on board with a whole team to educate the guests that are on board. So we provide lectures, and each day we'll take them out on little Zodiac boats and take them to quite remote parts and show them what's there in the environment in terms of wildlife, nature, geology, history, all of that kind of stuff. So I started out in the Kimberley, Western Australia. So I did 6 months or so there on and off. And then after that, I was very lucky to be able to go to Papua New Guinea, which is a part of the world that I don't think I ever thought I would get to, and then down to the Solomon Islands, down to New Caledonia. Then I did a little bit along the east coast of Australia. And I've just come back from 2 months in the Seychelles, which if you aren't familiar with where that is, that's in the Western Indian Ocean, so kind of near Madagascar. And I'm getting ready to head back to the Kimberley. And then later in the year, I'll be going back to the Seychelles. And then hopefully early next year, I'll be getting down to Antarctica. Fingers crossed.
So that's pretty tough. I'm sure there's very envious people now.
Yeah. I mean, someone's got to do it, you know.
So what got you started along this path, I guess? What got you interested in and sort of committed to become a marine biologist initially? What was the spark for you?
So this is something that people ask me quite a lot, and they get a little bit confused. And I too am a little bit confused when I talk about it, because I actually grew up in a small country town in the middle of nowhere, basically about a 3.5, 4 hour drive from the coast. So absolutely nowhere near the ocean. But for as long as I can remember, I had this weird fascination and obsession with seals and sea lions.
Okay.
And I have absolutely no idea where it came from. Maybe I saw a cartoon or a TV show or something at some point when I was little, and then I was just like, they are really cool. I want to work with those. And from then on, I initially really wanted to be a SEAL trainer. And then as I got older, I kind of learned more about, animals in captivity and decided that wasn't the path that I wanted to follow. And instead, kind of researched how else I could work with them and discovered marine biology because I didn't even know that was a thing, growing up
Yeah.
nowhere near the ocean. Marine biology, what on earth is that? And decided that I wanted to do that. So I went to university. My undergrad degree was marine science and management. And then I kind of fell into the world of whale watching kind of by accident. I started out volunteering for a dolphin research project
Okay.
in Byron Bay on the east coast of Australia. And that's when I saw my first whale, was when I was looking for dolphins. And then I was like, whoa, those things are pretty cool too. And then a couple of years after that, I went and volunteered on a whale watching boat. I just took myself down to this little company and I was like, hi, do you need someone to go on the boat to tell people about whales? Because I know some things about whales. And they did. And they took me. And kind of from then, I worked on whale watching boats in that part of the world. And then I did a little bit overseas in Boston. And then I came back and moved to Sydney. And then I did it in Sydney for quite a while. And then I did a master's degree in conservation biology. So I kind of wanted to branch out a little bit from the marine world. And then, through that, realized that I was passionate about a whole lot more than just whales and seals.
Yeah.
And then during COVID, obviously, there wasn't a whole lot of tourism stuff going on anywhere. And that kind of made me rethink what I wanted to do. And I had thought about expedition ships for quite a while and decided that that was the time to try and make the jump. And that's how I ended up there.
Wow. That's great, though. I love the just go along and say, hey,
Yeah.
come on and talk about whales.
Yeah. And it worked out. And now, because of that, from all of that experience, I had the right skills and background to be able to get into the expedition industry. And I haven't looked back.
That's fantastic. So with what you're doing at the moment, what's the most rewarding part of it for you?
Oof, that is a hard question. I think we get to go to really remote places that are extremely difficult to get to otherwise. So it's kind of the only way that you can get there. So, for example, in the Seychelles just now, so the Seychelles is an archipelago of about 115 islands, but the entire population lives within just a handful of islands in the north. And we traveled all the way to the other islands called the outer islands, which I think less than 5% of the Seychelles population get to visit in their lifetime.
Wow.
And so we had a family on one of the first trips that I did there. I was just chatting to this passenger. I was like, oh, like, where are you from? Like, just a bit of chit chat. And he said, oh, we're from the Seychelles. And I was just taken aback. I was like, what? Why are you here? Like, why are you doing a cruise in the Seychelles? And he said, because this is the only way to get to the outer islands. Like, it's the only way that we can get there. And I don't know how else I would do it. And so being able to take people places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to and sharing that experience with them, and not only for a holiday, but for them to learn about the environment and learn new things and have their eyes open to issues that they may not have been aware of otherwise is always really cool and rewarding. But there are so many things.
Yeah. And that's great, though, that they get the opportunity to learn more about their own country, basically, and get to see it
exactly
when it's so difficult. So of the places you've been to so far, do you I was going to say what's your favorite, but I kind of want to ask what stands out for you. Are there any places or experiences that really stand out for you?
Wow, you're asking all the tough questions.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, so there's different places have different meaning, I guess. So the Kimberley will always be really special to me because I am Australian, and it's kind of similar to the family in the Seychelles. It's a part of the country that I didn't think that I would ever get to, or at least I wouldn't get to anytime soon. So being able to go there and spend so much time there and get to know it quite intimately is always going to be very special to me. But then the time that we spent in Papua New Guinea had a much stronger focus on the culture, um, rather than kind of the environment. It does have a strong focus on that because that's, our backgrounds and what we're passionate about. But I was really surprised at how much I loved learning about the culture and just being exposed to all of that.
Right.
So that is really special as well, because also I never thought I'd get to Papua New Guinea, but to be able to go there and not just follow kind of the main spots that all the tourists go, but once again, because we're on a ship, we can get to really remote areas that you otherwise wouldn't get to. So
Yeah.
that's really special. And then getting to go to the outer islands of the Seychelles, same thing. It's just the remoteness of it is
Yeah.
is so special as well, and something that I won't take for granted for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. So, and you've got, so Antarctica's coming up. Well,
Hopefully.
hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
what is it about Antarctica? Is that the same sort of appeal?
Yeah, so for me, Antarctica, it's kind of the reason that I made the move into this industry was because I've always wanted to get there. So my initial original love of seals and sea
Yeah.
lions and whales, obviously, like that's a big draw card when it comes to Antarctica. And I've always had this weird thing that I want to see. I call them my whales, my East Coast whales, because I've spent so much time
Yeah.
whale watching on the coast of Australia, seeing them on their migration, when they're just charging past, making it up to their breeding and calving grounds. I've always really wanted to see them down in the feeding grounds, which is Antarctica.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it for me, which I don't know, it might sound silly to some people, but it's something that I've kind of wanted to do for a long time. So yeah, very
Well, that's
excited about
brilliant.
that.
And I think one of the interesting thing about migratory whales is that they kind of drive their own ecosystem in a way, because while they're down south feeding, they're obviously, pooing and all the rest, but it feeds their environment, so it actually creates more food for them, and it's one of the things that's driving the recovery in numbers. And
Mm-hmm.
because on the migration, they tend to be opportunistic feeders, but they don't feed very much. And for anyone who's not been whale watching, yeah, you can see them coming down south again. You can see they haven't been eating very much. It's a pretty
Yeah, you can
horrible
see
diet.
their body condition change for sure. When they're coming up north, they're all quite plump and rotund. And then by the
Yeah,
time they're making their way back towards Antarctica, they're just that kind of a bit leaner because they're not eating at all really while they migrate. So they just feed down in Antarctica for our particular population. And then they basically fast. Like you said, they will opportunistically feed kind of here and there in the more southern waters where you've got
yeah,
like some upwelling happening, nutrient rich waters. But once they get, past that area, they're not eating anything at all. And it goes for several months. So it's just absolutely insane what they do. So yeah, I would really love to be able to see them feeding down in Antarctica. It's totally different behaviors, different experience, all of that.
yeah, that'd be amazing. And what about? So I don't know if there's an answer to this, but I know there's a question about, do the populations mix? So, for example, Australia's East Coast population and the West Coast population, because I've lived in Perth as well, so I've sort of photographed both. Do they mix? Do they stay separate? What do we understand about that? Or do you know
Yeah,
what?
so from my understanding, there are different areas down in Antarctica where they will kind of congregate to feed. So there is a bit of mixing going on, but they will always return to where they were born to breed. So our East Coast whales are always going to be moving along the East Coast, and those West Coast whales are always going to be moving along the West Coast. But they do all head to those kind of same rough areas to feed
Yeah,
down in Antarctica. But they're
yeah,
always going to stick to that coastline.
yeah. So we've been talking about humpback whales. Are there any other animals? Well, seals, obviously, that you like. But have you discovered any other animals that really have got your interest while you've been traveling?
Yeah, so since entering, the expedition world, I've seen a range of different animals. And in the Kimberley, you can't talk about the Kimberley without talking about crocodiles, obviously.
No,
So
no.
there's quite a lot in the Kimberley, so much so that we can't go swimming anywhere, which is a real shame because the water is stunning in so many places. It's this beautiful turquoise color. It's obviously really hot, so the water is so inviting, but no matter how much you're tempted, you cannot, because it's
No.
just not worth the risk. And that can sometimes be hard to convey to the guests, but usually they're understanding. So crocodiles, I have to admit, they're not as exciting to watch as whales, because they literally just are pretty still the whole time unless they're hunting,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. So definitely crocodiles, but in other parts, the bird life, I think, has kind of caught me by surprise. Like, I never really considered myself to be into bird life that much at all, but now I just find myself looking at birds and being like, do I know what that is? Is that this, or is it this? And so that's kind of caught me by surprise. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just definitely just expanding my animal wildlife horizons, I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is always nice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And for me, birds, when I was doing the whale watching, I'd photograph birds if there were no whales because I was just really bored. I mean, that was what it came
Yeah,
down to. And I've been holding the camera for about an hour and hadn't taken a single picture. So I'd start photographing birds.
that's the ultimate bird. Yeah.
Just to pick up on one thing you said, do you find people don't quite get that some of the animals are dangerous and you can't just treat, they're on holiday, but they
Mhm.
can't treat the environment they're in like it's just a holiday place. It's not a holiday park. It's not safe. This is real. Do you find
Yes.
there's a kind of an education involved around that as well?
Well, absolutely. I would say for the most part, most guests are very understanding. And if at first they're not and they're caught a little bit off guard, if you take the time to kind of take them aside and just give them a little gentle, polite explanation,
Yeah,
immediately they're like, oh, okay, yep, I didn't realize, like, all good. Like, for example, in the Seychelles, they have the Aldabra giant tortoise, which is quite similar to the Galapagos giant tortoise.
yeah,
And there's some places we go where the tortoise are quite used to humans being around, so they're not really phased by our presence.
yeah.
So I had an instance where I saw a woman, a guest, feeding one. And I was like, I know these tortoises are very used to having people around, but even so, like, you should never feed wildlife. So I kind of pulled my expedition leader aside and was like, just so you know, I've just seen a guest over here, feeding a giant tortoise. Like, what's the go? Like, what should we do? And he just very gently and politely went over to her and said, look, I'm so sorry, but this is actually not a great idea. You'll see that they can get somewhat aggressive, even though they're quite large and they're very slow and they look very gentle. They've got a pretty powerful bite on them, so you don't want to
Yeah,
go messing around with that,
yeah,
basically. And he said, you'll see, as soon as you put that leaf down and try and walk away, it might follow you. And that's a direct result of people feeding them. And as soon as she was like, oh, okay, and she put the leaf down and she tried to walk away, and it got up and it started to follow her. And then she's kind of freaked out a little bit.
yeah,
But in a way, it's good because it's a way to make people realize. And then, the large group of people around her saw what happened, and then they're like, okay, not a good idea to feed the tortoise. So you have little situations like that. It's a little bit more serious in the Kimberley, obviously, with crocodiles.
yeah,
They're just
yeah,
on a whole other level. But yeah, for the most part, if you just are very gentle and kind with the way that you approach it, most people are very understanding, and it's something that they'll take on board and hopefully remember and then share with other people as well.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good. It's about, I think if you just give them space and respect them, and if they want to come to you, that's fine. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
to a point. When I was in Uganda in September, I did have a young male gorilla come running at me, and we were briefed on what to do, so that was fine. Which the
Mm-hmm.
phrase was "study the grass," and I absolutely loved it because I studied the hell out of that grass while the gorilla was just right next to me. But yeah,
Oh my God.
it's important to yeah. Again,
Yeah,
thanks for
it's about having an understanding, and also just having respect for the wildlife, I think, is a big part of it.
yeah,
If you respect them and you try and understand them and their behaviors, and you listen to the information being provided, then you're still going to have an incredible experience without being disrespectful and maybe potentially getting harmed or harming the wildlife, even
yeah.
if it's unintentional. Mm.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, is there anything else that stands out? Any other stories that were kind of fun, maybe, or
Oof. I
Exciting.
mean, one that comes to mind is it's not really related to wildlife though, but in Papua New Guinea, obviously it has quite a reputation for cannibalism.
Yeah,
Um, and we went to, like I said, quite a few remote places, and some places we were the first tourists that they had seen since before COVID. So for some of the little children, we were the first white people that they'd
yeah.
ever seen, which is quite an experience in itself. But there was a young mum on one of the islands, and just out of the blue, she goes, "You know about cannibals?" And I said, "Yeah, I've heard about them." And she goes, "My granddad was a cannibal." And I was just like taken aback. I was like, "Okay, that's interesting." And she goes, "Yeah, I was scared of him when I was a kid because I was scared if I did something wrong, he might eat me." And it was just so interesting the way that she just abruptly volunteered that information. So I think
Yeah,
that she's probably interacted with tourists in the past and knows like they're going to ask me about cannibalism or they want to know about it. So she just kind of like spewed this information out at me. But it was really interesting. And then another time we were in another part of Papua New Guinea and we were visiting these hot springs. And unfortunately, there have been some accidents in the past where people have fallen in, and they're not the kind of hot springs that are nice to, bathe in and relax. They're
this is
boiling
presumably,
water.
and you've got boiling mud as well and things like that going on. Yeah,
So
yeah,
you have to stand quite well back, and it's not like in places where you would go kind of, in Australia or New Zealand or somewhere where it's going to be nice and, roped off and kind of safe. It's just you just walk up and you can stand right on the edge if you want to.
yeah.
And local tour guides that we had were telling us that, several people have died here in the past and, how terrible it was, and that it was due to witchcraft and black magic. And
Oh,
just the way that they just said it so calmly because it's just such a normal part of their day-to-day life. So
yeah,
just being kind of taken aback by those kinds of things, but also I was so fascinated by it that I ended up kind of delving into the whole like witchcraft and black magic part of their culture, which I didn't really know anything about beforehand and hadn't really ever thought too much about. But yeah, it really surprised me that I was so interested in that. And so I think that's something that will stick with me for a while as well. Just talking to these people and just them volunteering this information because it's just such a normal part of their life that's so foreign to me and to the
yeah.
people that I was with. Yeah.
Well, that kind of ties in with the culture thing you're talking about as well. It's like expanding, like the animals are taking it back to people in a way that
Yeah.
these beliefs that seem quite archaic and you just assume nobody would ever believe them now, but the fact is people do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's such a different world over there and it's so close to Australia as well, like geographically. Um, there was an island that we visited on one trip and we were due to go back there in a few weeks' time, but shortly after we had left, tribal warfare had broken out and a few people had been killed during this warfare.
wow.
And the only reason that we found out was because we were in another part of Papua New Guinea that was a little bit more urbanized, and we saw a newspaper that had the information on it. And one of the guests actually brought it to me and said, "Cassie, isn't this where we were like 5 days ago?" And I
Not
had
in
a
the
look at it
brochure.
and I said, "Yes, yes, it is. That's where we were." And they were like, are you going to go back? Like, is this safe? And we work with an agent who is kind of our connection between the different tribes and us. And so he was kind of working with them to figure out what was going to happen. And turns out it was perfectly safe for us to return in the 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it was, even if the warfare was still continuing, because the two chiefs from the opposing sides would make the tribe stop the day that we were there and everything would be normal so that we could come and visit. And then once we leave, then they can resume. So there's all these kind of like rules around it because it is still a part of their society and their culture, but it's quite regimented. So
Yeah.
being around these people where violence and well what we consider to be violence is just a normal way for them to figure out little differences. was very interesting. And we did go back and it was totally fine. There was no evidence of warfare anywhere. I
Yeah.
think it had kind of wrapped up a few days before, but it still was so interesting just to know, like, well, there was tribal warfare going on here, probably on this exact like area where we are, and it was fine when we were there because visitors are coming. We have to show them respect and welcome them to our area, and everything's fine and dandy.
That's my, I did go to Papua New Guinea once when I was living in Cairns back in I think it's 97, 98. But it was bizarre because they had Air New Guinea had an office in Cairns. They had their magazine, and I was reading it, and there was an article about this guy doing scuba diving trips to old World War II wrecks because there'd been, one of the big battles not that far away, and a lot of the aircraft trying to get back and hadn't made it. And I remember the guy's number was in this magazine. So I just got in a telephone booth in Cairns, phoned him up and said, hey, can we do some diving? And we did this whole bizarre trip. But I'll never forget, we were on an island because of this thing about violence. And in fact, in the west part of the island, I think some tourists had been captured because it was quite, held hostage with this. But going home again, I was on this boat with two other people. There was a guy at the front, a guy driving, and this woman kind of telling them what to do. No one spoke English. And we were driving along through the sea. This is pre-dawn, and I'm looking at the hills and little spots of firelight. And it was just so bizarre as an experience. But I mean, it was great. But yeah, Papua New Guinea, I think, is just such a fascinating place. And the culture is amazing when you start looking at it as well. And it's so interesting. I'm not going to say funny, but it's sort of carrying on now, what you're describing. So Papua New Guinea is such an amazing place.
Yeah, and I think they will continue to live like that for as long as they can, for as long as possible, because that's just how their way of life is, and that's important to keep that alive, I think.
Yeah, it's their cultures, their beliefs, and all of that stuff. So, and when you were talking about the witchcraft, when I was in Namibia, I was talking to some people because I was working with elephants. And I hadn't understood that the local people, because they didn't grow up with the elephants, there'd been war there, the elephants moved out, new people moved in, then the elephants came back. But they have an almost supernatural fear of them. They regard them as the boogeyman because elephants can travel a large distance. They can be very quiet. And they kill people occasionally because if they're startled and they're quite short-sighted, they'll defend themselves. And that could be a drunk person, which it was in the case of this family. Someone they knew had been killed reasonably recently, and this is what EHRA are doing in Namibia, which is one of the projects I'm trying to support. But it comes back to education, and they're trying to educate the local people about how to live with elephants that might roam 75 k's potentially in a night. So
that's fascinating.
So this whole thing fascinates me as well. Because for Western people, I think we want to preserve all the animals, but we forget there's local people who have to live with them. And often they look at what we have, or, because they get TV and other things, and they want our lifestyle, and the animals get in the way as far as they're concerned. So I think that's one of the things to sort of balance with conservation. It's to get local people to buy into looking after the animals, and the animals being part of what sustains them, rather than a...
Yes. There are so many things to take into consideration that a lot of people don't think about necessarily, exactly like what you were just saying. That's so interesting.
Yeah, and when I was in Uganda, I also had the opportunity to chat to a couple of ex-poachers who are now it's a guy and his son, and the reason that they do is they don't get money. They're supposed to get money from the government, which never reaches them. It comes down to it being tribal. And the tribe that actually has the control will bring their people in, even if they're a long way away. And the local tribe don't get a look in. So this tribal business is still going on, and it's still one of the problems, where conservationists are trying to take action. So it's, again, interesting that, again, in PNG, it's a tribal... I mean, we are tribe, look at sports.
Yeah, that's true, Yeah, it's all the same, just some different labels, I suppose.
So, I guess just to finish off, is there anything you'd like to share with people, or say anything about someone who, people who are inspired by your story, and perhaps give them a bit of advice on how to get started, or anything else you'd like to share, any other stories? Completely up to you.
Oh,
Not a hard one
I
again.
just I would just say that I'm so happy that I kind of found this industry and I'm very grateful for it. And for anybody that's kind of wanting to get into it, you just need to be really passionate, I think, and be willing to learn if there are things that you're not necessarily that familiar with. So for me, my main background obviously was whales primarily, and that kind of extends out into the marine realm generally with my background as well. But I didn't really know anything about crocodiles before, finding this job and heading to the Kimberley. But I am passionate about the environment and about wildlife. So it's not hard for me to kind of delve into researching and just like learning about all that kind of stuff. So you don't necessarily have to have a scientific background to work in this industry. I would say that the main thing is you just have to be passionate. You have to enjoy educating people and sharing knowledge and be willing to learn, like I said, because there's a lot to learn. Every kind of area that I go to, there are so many new things to discover, so many things to get my head around, but it's always such a joyful process going through all of that and learning those new things, and then being able to share what I've learned with the guests that are on board, and hopefully they're able to go home obviously having had an amazing holiday, but learning a thing or two as well, because we provide information when we're out in the field, but on board the team is always available to have a chat, to answer any questions, and we also provide lectures on board as well around kind of our areas of expertise, I suppose. But like I said, you just have to be passionate and willing to learn, and you can go pretty far.
That's great. And what I'll do in the sort of text part of this, I'll put a link to your Instagram account, if that's okay, because you've got some amazing photographs there. So anyone who'd like to see more of...
Thank you. I'm just getting around to posting things. I've been working on this ship or in this industry for just over a year now, and I've literally just in the last couple of weeks gotten around to going through all of my images, so there'll be a lot to come.
Yeah, and it's a great mix of animals and people. I was looking at it earlier, and it's a really great mix and great photographs. So anyone who put that in the description, and you can link across to Cassie's Instagram. So thanks again, Cassie. That's great. I really appreciate you giving me a bit of time in between rushing off to places. And it's been great to catch up again. And I've really enjoyed our chat. So thanks very much.
No, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Oh, and one thing just before you go, please take a look at the 2026 wildlife calendar. That's available now. It's on the website. There's a link below the description of this podcast episode. So please take a look, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye now.